And we have quorum, so let's get this meeting underway. I'll begin just by reading out the Native Solidarity Statement very briefly. So we'd like to acknowledge that Concordia University is on the traditional territory of the Ghanaian Gehaga, a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst nations. The Concordia Student Union recognizes and respects the Ghanaian Gehaga as the traditional custodians of the lands and waters on which we meet today. So this meeting is officially called to order. As far as roll call goes, welcome everybody, especially the new faces. Glad to see you. If you haven't gotten a chance to sign in, the sign-in sheet is just behind the entrance door. So please make sure you do. Have a little bit of admin as far as requests for excusals and as far as regrets, so I'll just go over those. Bear with me. There's Michael G, who is sending his regrets, saying that he can't make it for this meeting. Combination of just being under the weather and time management. As well as Omar, who says that he sends his regrets for this meeting and that he will not be continuing on the next meeting, but at subsequent meetings, since he's going to resign at the end of the semester. And that'll be my chairperson's report. Ben says that he will be running late due to a Board of Governors meeting, but is well on his way. And now request for excusal. So Jenna wrote that she wants everyone to know that unfortunately she won't be able to attend this meeting because she was diagnosed with acute bronchitis, which unfortunately will last a solid 3 or 4 weeks. Must be down to 2 or 3 weeks at this point. But anyhow, can't make it. One of our new counselors, Armani, writes to us, unfortunately, I have an exam today at 7 o'clock until 10, and as such, request to be excused, but I shall be at the next meeting and look forward to it. I have 2 requests for excusals, not for exams that are happening right now, but for people who are studying for exams, which is a minor nuance. The first of which is Rami, who says that he's just a bit swamped and needs to study. The second of whom is Marcus, who writes that he regrets to inform council that I will not be able to attend tonight's meeting as I'm in the middle of studying for exams. I would also like to recommend that we limit the amount of regular council meetings surrounding exam time. Take that as you will. So for the sake of context, Rami has no absences yet, neither does Marcus. And there's also Genevieve, who writes, I will not be able to attend this meeting since I have been called to work this evening. I was wondering if I could get excused for this or not. I don't mind if I cannot be excused, but I would rather be excused than not. And and she has 1 absence so far. So it's a lot to go through. I apologize. If you want me to reread anything, then I'll gladly do so, and I'll be taking motions from the floor, obviously. Yes, Rachel.
I motion to excuse the first 2. The exam is happening now, and the bronchitis.
Okay, that would be, yeah.
Yeah.
It's Jenna and Armani.
Yeah.
So the motion to excuse them for this meeting. Is there a seconder to that motion? Luis, okay. I mean, we're talking about something pretty much covered in the standing regs on both counts. Is there any opposition to this vote? Okay, great. So they're formally excused. Which would leave Rami, Marcus, and Genevieve. Okay, not seeing any other motions arise, then we can proceed with the approval of the agenda. So, especially for those who are new, this is the point at which we modify the agenda. We either add something to it or withdraw a point if it's no longer necessary. We can shift it around and pull things from the consent agenda. So if you're a report that you're curious about or would like to maybe ask some questions, it can be pulled and added onto the regular agenda. If not, the content of the consent agenda is approved along with the approval of the full agenda. I should begin by stating that I was working off the template of last meeting's agenda and didn't include positions booked in the consent agenda that ought to be there, so that would be point B in the consent agenda. Mary?
So you have added it?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I knew you would check me.
Can I just quickly make a comment then? Just for folks who are new, the positions book is one of our guiding policy documents. So when positions are passed either at council or by the membership through referendum, we integrate them through the positions book. So whenever we update it with those new positions, we just pass it through the consent agenda. So if you have any opposition to how I integrated the positions passed since June 10th, now would be the time to pull it from the consent agenda and discuss those. But it's basically an updating that happens every couple months.
That's great, thank you. Yes.
Sorry, kind of just what Marianne was mentioning, but I didn't receive like an email for the meeting from you with the document.
Okay.
So I sort of figured out it was today. So
Okay.
which is fine. Like, but it's just I don't have the agenda at the moment, so it's hard for me to just try to follow what's happening since it's my first meeting.
Yeah,
It'd be
yeah,
nice
yeah.
to have.
Yeah, I definitely apologize for that.
fine.
You definitely weren't the first either of the new councillors to not receive an agenda. Some people only got it today, and I apologize for that too. Are you also now in the Facebook group?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So, all right, there was a message that went out saying, like, let me know if you hadn't received it, but I nonetheless
yeah.
apologize for that.
It's fine.
I have to speak with the IT coordinator about the new email addresses.
Is there a way to just have it so it's visual somewhere?
Oh, sure.
Like, that's more my request, not that to say that you did a bad job. It's more I'd like to have an agenda to just
Sure, yeah,
work
yeah.
with right now. That's
Yeah, I appreciate that. I can
Well,
send,
that's-
I can send you one just after we
In the
get into the
meantime, there's a
presentation.
printed copy
Oh,
here that you
thanks.
could use for the time being.
I
Great.
can just like copy of this.
Okay, I'll nonetheless send you one during the presentation. But that is an unfortunate position to be in. I apologize. And if any of the new councillors at any point feel like someone is going too fast or would like some context or some explanation, please feel free to do so. It's a very welcoming crowd. So we're still at the approval of the agenda. Any modifications to be made? Yeah, Lucy?
Article the student life executive plan?
Okay. And can we put that in new business as?
Yeah, it's super minor.
Yeah, okay. That'd be in, I'll put it as the beginning of new business.
Okay, cool.
Okay, anything further? Okay, if there's nothing further to add, then we can vote on the approval of the agenda, which ipso facto ratifies the consent agenda. So all those in favor of approving today's agenda, please raise your placards. Those opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, great, that carries. Which takes us right along to the beginning, our presentation, courtesy of Jean, so take it away. I'll be sending, sorry, one last thing, I will be sending the updated agenda to the Facebook group if you folks want to check it out there.
Wow, these lights.
If you could both just like scoot slightly to
Yeah,
the side.
actually,
Just
actually,
like, around the wrist instead of
just
just
straight like this.
okay. So, hi everybody. My name is Gene. I'm the campaigns and academics researcher at the Concordia Student Union. One of the first documents that I started when I got hired at the end of the summer was a sort of a primer document on the effects of recent austerity budget cuts to Concordia University over the last few years, to try and identify really concretely, as much as we could, the effects that the cuts have had at the university. And I was asked by the CSU executive to give a brief presentation sort of summarizing the research that I've been able to put together to date for the benefit of CSU Council. So really quickly, I want to start off by just giving you a quick overview of how universities are funded in Quebec. because this is pretty cogent to the question of how cuts to that funding affects the university. So here at Concordia University, over 95% of the university's operating budget is supplied through provincial grants, so public money from the government, and fees that are charged to students. So those are tuition fees and obligatory institutional fees are the two largest categories of those. In terms of the grants that we receive from the government, by far the largest grant is the provincial operating grant. It accounts for between 2/3 and 3/4 of the university's funding here at Concordia. It's based on what are called full-time equivalents, so FTEs. Basically, in any given department at the university, the administration looks at how many credits are being taken in a given year, and then divides that number by 30. And it's because 15 credits a semester is a full-time student, so 30 credits a year is like a full-time course load, and so it's considered a full-time equivalent. But they have no idea how many individual humans make up those credits, and it really doesn't matter as far as the funding formula goes. It's just any bundle of 30 credits for that year. So the university takes its FTEs and they are multiplied by a given factor, which is set by the provincial government using a weighting table, this is just a quick, I pulled this out of a government document just to give you an idea. I don't want to go over it too quickly, but basically the weightings go from a factor of 1.0 in a Bachelor's of Arts program, all the way up to almost a factor of 10 in veterinary medicine for undergraduate students, and a whole range in between. So these are disciplines that are established by the provincial government. They don't necessarily overlap with a given department or given faculty, but every program that's given in Quebec is slotted into one of these for the sake of figuring out how much funding the university gets for it. And you can see that master's students and PhD students have much, much higher weightings. So these are all meant to reflect the cost of training a given student in a given program. So obviously, like veterinary medicine and dental hygienists and stuff like that, they need a lot more stuff than a philosophy student. Pretty much get by with a blackboard. They multiply the FTEs by these weighting factors to get weighted FTEs, and then the operating grant is assigned, it's just a base amount of money per weighted FTE, and that makes up the sum of the university's funding. The operating grant is meant to cover the university's teaching activities, support for teaching and for students, as well as facilities maintenance for the campus. So it's really the biggest source of funding and the biggest source of expenses for the university. There's also a number of smaller grants that are provided by the provincial government, specifically to support research and for capital investment projects. So, buying new buildings or building new facilities or getting new equipment comes from the capital investment fund. Tuition and obligatory fees are the second largest source of funding for Quebec universities. These are basically constituted of a few different factors. First of all, every student enrolled in a Quebec tuition rate, which for this year was set at $76.45 per credit, and just everybody pays that. It's indexed annually, so it goes up every year now, usually by about between 1.5 and 2.5% every year. Out-of-province students and international students in Quebec are also charged an additional amount, which is called a forfaitaire. For out-of-province students, that comes to an additional $157.90 per credit that they're enrolled in, whereas international students are charged either $447.12 or $508.37. It's different amounts depending on which program they're enrolled in. What's important to know is that tuition rates and forfaitaire rates are set by decree by the Minister of Higher Education every year. So the university has no latitude in how much money they can charge for these things. They're told directly by the government. It's also important to know that forfaitaires are collected by the university but then remitted to the provincial government. And the provincial government then redistributes that money through the entire university network in Quebec. So this is a way to try and equal out, there are obviously large urban universities are a lot more attractive to international students or out-of-province students than smaller regional universities. So the government takes it on themselves to redistribute the extra money that's being collected from those students to support smaller universities, regional universities, and try and even out some of the inequalities that would come from that. Concordia University's administration calls these clawbacks by the government. They feel like their money's being stolen from them. every student at Concordia also pays what are known as obligatory institutional fees. For this year, those are currently set at $28.27 per credit. So it's almost, I mean, it's more than a third of what the base tuition rate is. So every student is starting off paying over $100 a credit right off the bat into Concordia University's coffers. It's important to know that although obligatory institutional fees are collected from students, we have no idea what they're used for. We don't have access to any budgetary information about them, and frankly, any real idea what an administration fee does in a concrete sense. It's always been a little troubling. In terms of the cuts that have happened at Concordia and in the province, it's a brief timeline. Back in December of 2012, the provincial government told Quebec universities that there was going to be like a one-time cut. They're going to have to absorb a cut, and this is in December. The budgetary year runs from June to May, so it's halfway through their fiscal year, and they're told that they need to cut, for Concordia, $13.2 million out of their budget for that year that's already underway. So that was pretty shitty. But it was supposed to be a one-time thing. We'll balance the books after that, reinvest in universities. At the end of the fiscal year, so in April of 2013, the government announced that those $13.2 million in cuts were being made permanent. So they are now recurring year after year, and that money was never going to come back to universities. So Concordia, again, for their next budget, 2013-14, had to cut that same $13.2 million back out of their budget. In September of 2014, new cuts were announced for the 14-15 academic year. So this is a second round that came out to $13.2 million for Concordia. And the government announced that universities were no longer allowed to run deficits. So most universities had responded to the first round of cuts by projecting a deficit for the coming years. But because the government had said that no deficits, zero deficit budgets, Concordia had to incorporate an additional $2.5 million of cuts into their budget because they couldn't carry it as a deficit anymore. And in November of the same year, the government announced a second round of cuts for that year of $1.5 million. So those were all in the 2014-15 year. And then for this year, it was announced at the beginning of the fiscal year, a third round of cuts to universities, which came out to $6.2 million at Concordia. So over the course of 3 years, it's $36.6 million that was cut from university's budget. And that's about 10%. It's like 9 to 10% of the university's annual operating budget that has been amputated by the provincial government. And I mean, when you realize that well over 2/3 of the university's funding comes from provincial grants, I think it's easy to understand why cuts to those grants have such an important effect on the university. In terms of how Concordia University has actually gone about cutting their budget to accommodate these, probably most important to students are the changes that have happened in classes at Concordia. So even very early on in 2012-13, the university made an administrative decision to increase the minimum size of seminar courses at the university for undergraduate and graduate students. So at the courses that are supposed to be the most intensive and the most close-knit, they were already starting to raise how many students were the minimum, and therefore removing the number of, if a seminar course only had 6-7 students in it, they no longer had any obligation of giving that course. So they're saving themselves money on teaching as well. Based on data that the union's been able to put together, we know that between 2011-12 and 13-14, so over 2 years, 3 of the university's faculties, Fine Arts, JMSB, and Arts and Science, each lost over 5% of the courses that they were offering in those faculties. These are very heterogeneous changes from department to department. Some departments had small increases, some had very drastic cuts. So some departments lost even between 10 and 20% of the courses that were being offered over a 2-year period. 90% of the courses that were cut over this time were taught by part-time faculty members. It's a lot easier to take courses away from them than full-time members. This is particularly salient because we know from the Part-Time Faculty Association that between last year and this year, they've seen another 7% drop in the number of courses being taught or offered to part-time faculty members across the university again. And some departments have cuts as high as 60% of courses that are taught by part-time faculty that are no longer being offered. So if, and this is data that we can't independently verify, but if it holds with the trends that we saw in our previous data set, it's very likely that this 7% cuts are not being replaced by courses taught by full-time or limited term appointments in most cases. So you're easily looking at probably a solid 10, 12% drop in the number of courses given across the university over this time period. And just, I mean, for a lot of it is anecdotal, but a lot of professors and students that we've talking with have been talking about increasing class sizes across the board, year over year currently, as the university is sort of trying to, I mean, the number of students is increasing every year at the university. When you're losing 10% of classes at the same time, you have to put those students somewhere. In terms of staff, every year since 2012, 2013, the university has announced that they're leaving vacant positions in the university unfilled or eliminating those positions altogether. But they have never been very forthcoming about what the numbers are for those positions. So we really don't know what the effect of those cuts and those decisions have been. What we do know from 2014-15 is when the university instituted their voluntary departure program for staff, which eliminated 65 positions permanently from the university. Their goal was to eliminate 180 positions. So given its sort of lackluster performance from that point of view, they also announced that they were leaving 40 other positions vacant, unfilled. So they're not hiring anybody to fill those positions. Just for information, the VDP program cost the university $9 million in buyouts. They paid a lot of people extra salary to get them to retire early, to the point. But that in turn has produced $5.7 million in recurring annual savings. So they're hoping to make that $9 billion back over like 2 or 3 years. And that forms a multi-year deficit separate from the university's deficit of their operating budget. The university also had something called their contingency fund. So normally, this was, as part of the operating budget, it was normally set at $4 million a year. Some amount of that fund was used to absorb some of the cuts every year, again, with amounts unspecified. The university is not super forthcoming about this information. In 2013-14, we do know from minutes of the Board of Governors that they authorized the use of additional reserve funds to absorb $5.4 million in losses in the budget. And now, going forward, the contingency fund has been reduced to $1 million. So the university's achieving $3 million of annual savings by just cutting into the money they have on hand to deal with emergencies. The co-op program, this is a pretty sad one. So the university used to receive an envelope of money from the provincial government that was used to subsidize students' salaries who were doing work terms at smaller companies. So people who are working for not-for-profits, community organizations, startup companies, more entrepreneurial kind of dynamic work environments, but that didn't have the budgetary overhead to just add a full-time paid staff position for a semester, could be subsidized so that students were being properly remunerated for their work. Now that that money's been cut, the university has had to drop a lot of organizations that they were working with through the co-op program, and I know, like the art history co-op program, for example, was forced to close essentially because most of the galleries where students were working, they don't have the money on hand to pay somebody full-time salary for that time period. So there's a real possibility that other programs, other co-op programs could be threatened in the future by the absence of these types of funds. There's also just deficits. Right now, Concordia is projecting an $8.2 million deficit for the current academic year, 2015-16. It's really important to note that the government still has a zero deficit policy for universities. So if Concordia does actually post a deficit at the end of their fiscal year, there's a very real possibility that they could be slapped with sanctions by the government next year in terms of withholding some of the operating grant. At the same time, this was a very, very clear political message that was sent by the administration and the Board of Governors that, in their opinion, Concordia cannot these $8 million of cuts into their budget without seriously affecting its academic mission. I think it says a lot when even the Board of Governors is saying that this will compromise the university's ability to accomplish its mission. So to talk a little bit of the effects of these cuts, to teaching and learning, I mean, really basically fewer class options very directly means more generic and homogeneous programs for a lot of students. You have less choices of how to broaden your areas of interest, less ability to specialize into different parts of your field. You're really kept on a very straight path when you're getting rid of a lot of the really interesting choices that people had beforehand. Larger classes, obviously less contact time with professors, probably less ability to engage in those very collegial, like group discussions when you're in a class of like 80 people instead of 30 or 40 people. These things make a really big difference on the in-class experience for students. We also have TAs that are being forced to take on a much larger pedagogical role at the university without any additional pay or support. In fact, the university is trying to cut the wages of their TAs, while at the same time increasing class sizes, so the only way students can actually engage in like legitimate discussion of the material is with the TA, who's an exploited worker as opposed to being like integrated as an actual component of the education experience here at the university. Less diverse opportunities for experiential learning outside the classroom with cuts to the co-op programs, and just less funds available for more interesting opportunities for students to actually put into application what they're learning. And there's increasing pressure to eliminate programs and departments that underperform. So departments or programs that have lower enrollments, who aren't getting as much provincial funding, who aren't bringing in corporate funding or private donor funding, are increasingly under pressure. The University of Laval actually just cut 3 of its smallest programs starting in January 2016. And they're very clear that they're actively looking at cutting other programs. And these are discussions that are happening at universities across Quebec. So I think it says a lot about what could happen if the university is forced to integrate, for example, that $8 million deficit, or if there's future cuts. There's a very real possibility of programs ending up on the chopping block. There's also a big effect on the pressure to increase students' bills. The alleged underfunding of universities in 2012, 2011 was one of the big driving factors behind the government's intention to raise tuition by 75% at the time. After 4 years of recurring cuts over and over again, there's more or less a consensus now that universities are actually underfunded in Quebec. If they weren't before, we know they are now. And there's a very real possibility that this could serve as the basis to, again, try to attack the accessibility of post-secondary education in the province, which is very troubling, obviously. There's also the possibility of a very serious increase in tuition costs for undergraduate international students in a new class of deregulated programs. So you remember earlier when I talked about the forfaitaires for international students and how the university would remit those to the government and everything. There's now certain programs, pretty much every program in Don Wilson School of Business and the Faculty of Engineering and Computer Science, which have become deregulated for international undergraduate students. And that means the university no longer has to give the forfaitaires that they charge to the provincial government, but in return, they no longer get any, those students aren't counted as part of the operating grant. But what this means is that universities can set those tuition costs at whatever they want. They're not set by the ministry anymore. And we know for a fact that Concordia University and other universities in Quebec are actively looking at these programs as joining an international market for education. And they're trying to figure out fair market prices to charge international students for these. So there's a very, very real possibility of universities across Quebec, and even here at Concordia, changing these tuition fees at any time and trying to extract additional cash out of international students. Yeah. Another big problem is increases in corporate influence in the academy. So lots of public funds often tend to turn into a search for private funds by universities. Concordia is currently expending more and more energy seeking out private donations and partnerships with major corporations. They've made a lot of really big announcements about big donations recently, millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars coming in from private companies. But this obviously can be very problematic for the academy depending on how it's handled. A lot of the time, increased corporate roles in the university threaten academic freedom when researchers who, when they're working with public funds, are obviously able to explore the fields that interest them and set their own research topics. When it comes to private money, you're not going to get any unless your research is serving their interests and their needs. It presents very potential problem for the autonomy of the university. A lot of these really big donations are given specifically for the purpose of setting up new departments at the university, new schools, new institutes. So you have major donors establishing university curriculum instead of the university community. You also end up have potential threats to students' intellectual property rights. A lot of students who work on projects that are funded by corporate contracts and things like that will often have riders in the contract that limit what they can do with their findings, how they can publish, and they almost always give up rights to any inventions that they make in the process. And when corporate funding is all you have, it's a hard choice to, have a research project and give away your rights or just not do any research at all. Obviously, these are issues that become graver and graver the more serious the funding problems become. Currently, a lot of these things have been happening at the university over the last 10, 15, 20 years in small ways, and they remain very troubling. But it's not as bad as it could get, let's say. We've also seen, I'm sure you've all noticed, a multiplication of advertising spaces on campus and serious increases in the scale of advertising spaces on campus, which is really problematic when you realize that you're actually contributing financially to this institution to participate here and then being resold by your university as eyeballs for advertisers. I always find that really troubling. Some of the barriers that we faced in this research and to student participation as a whole in the budget cut process has to do with the current decentralization of decision making at the university. So a lot of the measures that were put in place to absorb the cuts have been adopted at lower levels of the university, in departments and at faculty levels. What this means is that very few of these decisions were overseen by the centralized bodies at the university, like Senate and the Board of Governors, where students actually have good representation or relatively well organized. And information is also spread across the university and is not always being centralized in places where it's accessible to students to get a global idea of what's happening at the university. A lot of these cuts are happening in a piecemeal way, and it's very difficult for us as students to get involved in that conversation in a comprehensive way. The decentralization of decision-making at Concordia is very likely to increase. They're rolling out a new budget model in the next couple of years at the university, and in discussions with the chief financial officer of the university, they described the model to us as giving a much more important strategic role to departmental councils in terms of making decisions about how their departments and their programs are going to be transforming in the next 5 to 10 years. Most university administrators see the coming time as very disruptive for higher education, and they expect to see very serious transformations, and they're putting the power for those transformations down at departmental levels. And those decisions are going to be given budgetary implications, very probably, under the new model. So I really wanted to finish with a quick appeal to the council, since I was given this tribunal, about how you could potentially contribute to the work that I've been doing, that I feel like the CSU has been doing. One thing is to contribute to this research, if you're able. Given the fact that these decisions are often made in decentralized processes, it's really, I think, up to students to reflect those processes. So I think that it'd be really important if we could get students to collectivize information about the effects of the budget cuts in their department, in the lived experience of their peers and colleagues in that department, and share that information so we can try and build up the comprehensive image that we need of the university. The other thing that I think is really critical coming up in the next little while is to organize our departments. The struggles that are going to be taking place over the future of what a university is, how programs are delivered, what the structure of those programs are going to be, the nature of education, I think a lot of those are going to be taking place in our university's departments. So I really think it's important for students to work to try and improve their power relations in those departments. There's a lot of departments in this university where students are unrepresented or underrepresented or systematically excluded from decision making and information about what's going on. And I think that it's really critical for students to take the coming years to strengthen the departmental associations and just make sure that they're being represented and heard at that level. And I would really enjoin all of the people here who are sitting here as leaders of your respective constituencies and student bodies to try and take that on a little bit and think about how your students are being represented at the departmental level and not just the levels of Senate and the board in those places. I think it's critical stuff that's going to be happening the next while. And if students want to remain a powerful voice in it, I think there's serious transformations that may have to take place in the Concordia student movement itself in response. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions or any comments for Gene?
I think Jason had a question.
It's a long one. It's, when you were mentioning the cuts that were made permanent, after that you said new cuts, but you consider the same amount. So those were added on top?
Yeah. Yeah,
So
so
the
it's
double-
13.2 and then 13.2.
So it's for a total of 26.4.
Yeah, and then the 2.5 that had to be absorbed,
From
and
the
then the
deficit.
1.5 that was added, and then the...
Those are all cumulative after that
Everything
point.
after that point is cumulative.
Okay,
Yeah, exactly.
all right.
Yeah.
There's one question.
Anybody else have any questions?
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very
You're
much.
welcome. Thanks a lot for your time.
Was it you that organized those pamphlets, Austerity Concordia, that are available at the lobby of the hall building?
I mean, I produced the content for those pamphlets. Yeah. I work in the office. I don't get out a lot. It's nice for me to see other faces.
Great. Well, with the presentation complete, we can move on to our next point for the evening, which is appointments, which hopefully will be a bit more exciting than usual, especially for the new counselors. So, Chloe, maybe with your help, we can once again go over the different committees.
So I think actually today, each person, just because like when we did the initial appointments, each person kind of spoke for their own committee, so we're gonna do that again today, if that's okay with you.
Yeah. All right.
So I guess finance first, which would be a mass, and there's one seat available for this.
Hello, I'm the finance coordinator. There is one seat available right now for the finance committee. We meet on Tuesdays at 2 is the general call for that. Sometimes on Thursday at 5. Once or twice a month, we discuss and review the budgets, the various committee budgets that have expenses during the year, and we also review any expense over a considerable amount that can be discussed through committees, or any approaches or any student inquiries from student groups, from student-run initiatives, and anything that is related to the finances of the CSU and the day-to-day operationals. So yeah, and it's a decent, fun committee. It's tedious at times, but it's interesting and good, I think.
Thanks, Anas. So maybe I'll just take a moment real quick for the new folks. As far as how a committee goes procedurally, we're on this point to see if somebody would like to be appointed to this committee. So somebody can nominate another member of council or yourselves, which would then possibly be seconded, and just give a little chat, a little spiel on why you would be interested in joining said committee. So we'll begin right now with the finance one. Of course, there's no pressure for anyone to sit on any committee whatsoever. Chloe?
Also, if you're like unsure right now, the point will come up again at the next meeting if you want like more time to think about it.
Okay, seems fairly clear for finance. We can proceed then to appointments.
So appointments committee is my committee. We are the ones that interview people for any of the academic bodies. So we do interviews for Senate, we do interviews for all the students at large on the different committees. Pretty much any position that's like coming through that doesn't have to go to council directly comes to appointments committee. So if you're interested in doing interviews, or if you have experience doing interviews, then this is probably a great committee for you. So you can nominate yourselves now.
Are there any nominations for the appointments committee? All right, fair enough. Lori, here to talk about Clubs in Space?
Most definitely. All right. How's everybody doing? My name is Lori, and I need people that are dedicated, passionate, not part of a club because that'd be a conflict of interest. So if you're an executive, you can be on an executive of an association. Let's say any association that we have. We do have a lot of them. Now, what we do at the Clubs and Space Committee is very fun. We take a look at the different properties that we have around campus. We look at how we can increase student involvement within the school, as well as we allocate money to different associations. These associations vary, and we have quite a bit of money left over. So that means that we're able to give money to students to do things that will create involvement. If you want, and if you know anyone who would be great for this position, I would suggest you nominate yourself, because this is very important. This creates an engaged and involved community, and you are the leaders of today that can make a difference and that can offer your feedback and support. So please nominate yourself if you think you have what it takes to be the next committee member of the Clubs and Space Committee. Thank you.
All right, and the placard went up immediately.
Just to make sure, Lori, do you have 1 or 2 spaces available?
Or 3. I have not 1, not 2, 3 spaces available. Can you imagine that? But we, it gets very animated in our committee meetings. So feel free to jump on board. It's not because it's not a fun committee that we don't have. It's just some people had to leave. You know, it happens. So please don't think that's because of me or the members. So I would suggest you take the time, like maybe 30 seconds, to just be like, oh, I'd love to be part of this committee. Maybe, maybe not. All right, thank you.
And the floor is open for appointments.
I actually have a question.
Ooh.
What was the restriction of people, did you say executives of associations can sit on the committee?
Yes, this is one of the main concerns, but,
Can I just clarify?
yes.
Can I finish this one?
Yeah.
Executives on clubs, not on like MAs or.
Yes.
So if you're on like a club, then you can't, but if you're on an MA, like a member association, then you're fine.
Okay, cool. Can I appoint myself right here?
Yes, I'd love to have you, Haley.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Is there a seconder to?
we need just to go by the process.
Second, Lucy. Would you like to say a word, Haley, about why you'd like to be on this committee?
Yeah, I don't know. I just really like community building. I mean, I've kind of tried to do it on the level of my association, and that hasn't necessarily gone the way that I planned it to. So I just like bigger and broader horizons, I guess.
You know what? You have a team in back of you, and with you there and us, we can make something beautiful.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, well, thank you for that, Haley. I guess we can proceed right to a vote unless anyone has any questions for her. Yeah, let's just go to a vote then. Those in favor of appointing Haley to the Clubs and Space Committee? Those opposed? And any abstentions? Congratulations, Haley. Now, I saw a couple of placards go up. Maybe it was to address a point, but at least I think I saw yours.
Oh, yeah, rescind.
Rescind, okay. All right, speakers list is open, and there are still 2 positions for this club before we proceed to the next. John?
I was just going to make the mention that it's normal for counselors to be on like at least 1 committee. I think even in the standing ranks it says something like that. So I just wanted to put that out there as like a point of information. Yeah, context. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Lucy?
I'm sorry if this was already mentioned. I'm pretty tired today because it's exam season. But if it hasn't been mentioned, not only are counselors expected to sit on 1 committee, but if you want to sit on more than 1, that's something that happens. So if you're just like waiting to hear your committee, but you're kind of interested in another one, you should totally sit on both because you're just spreading your talents around. So.
All right, thank you. Okay. If that clears up Clubs in Space, we can proceed to sustainability then.
Yes. So my committee, we have 2 positions opened, and we are a committee that meets at least once a month, and we go over the projects or the dossiers that I'm working on, and it's very fun. And I really hope that the people who do nominate themselves are ready to be committed to the committee. because in the past it's been really difficult to meet all together, and I really care about this committee, and I really want us to be able to like have a committee meeting every month so that we can build a relationship and work together as a team, so that you also have ownership in the projects that I'm working on. So yeah, and if people want to have more information about the committee, really quickly, next semester I'll be working on the Concordia transitions. I'm also looking at developing a social sustainability workshop series, and I'm really excited about it. It's brand new, and it would be really cool to have people jump on board and help develop this workshop series. And I also work with Chloe, the VP Loyola, on the greenhouse project, and there's so much more, but that's a little scoop of what we're going to be talking about. And yeah, so hopefully people are into that.
Thank you. Any nominations for the Sustainability Committee? Oh, all right. We'll take the speakers list. Charles, and then Antoine, and then is it Haley?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Charles.
Sustainability is a big interest of mine. I'm a member of the Loyola College for Diversity and Sustainability, and took the Organizing Sustainability series facilitated by Mike Fink and Alex Tibet already this fall, and loved it. I just want to be involved more.
Okay, that sounds like a self-nomination to me. Maybe before we get a seconder, how many positions are available for this committee?
There are 2.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
But I would be really open to having more if that's something that could be allowed.
Well, we'll take it one step at a time. So
Yeah.
if someone wants to do second, Charles. Second by Marcus. Okay. Well, you already explained yourself a little bit. Thank you for that. So as far as motivation goes, I think that seems fine. Can we proceed to a vote then? I think so. So those in favor of appointing Charles to the Sustainability Committee? Okay, those opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, Chloe, is your placard? You have a question?
Yes, I have a question. I can't vote.
Okay, yeah.
I just
Well,
have-
that obviously carries, so congratulations, Charles. Yes, question?
I just wanted to say, like, out of point of process, like, we had 3 that went up. If, like, multiple people are nominating themselves, I think it's a bit problematic if, like, the first person's, like, nominated, the second person's nominated, and the third person can't nominate themselves anymore.
Yeah, sure indeed.
So I don't know.
Okay.
They should really think for themselves. Like,
Well,
perhaps-
maybe to begin, the 2 other people on the speakers list, Antoine and Haley, were you both interested in that same committee?
Yeah.
Sure. Truthfully, I don't know how it would proceed to have more people than the allotted amount of people on a committee. I'm not sure on how that would work, but I'm seeing placards go. Maybe it's for assistance. Marcus and then John.
There is just a bylaw we'd have to notwithstand. We did it in our initial meeting at the beginning of this year. I do not know it off the top of my head, but maybe somebody who has a computer can just quickly look that up. Standing right?
Yeah, I think that would be right. Thank you very much for that. John?
I was going to say that we could just not withstand this stuff here to
Okay.
allow more people on the committee. Same
Okay.
thing. I was saying the same thing.
Yeah, all right, thank you very much. Yeah, in which case, how about we just have both people do the nomination and motivations and then take it from there vote-wise. So we'll keep in the order of the speakers list, starting with Antoine.
Well, it seemed like the one that I was more interested about. I think like sustainability and environment is really like a key thing that we need to focus on in the next few years and decades and stuff. So it's just something that interests me, and I feel like it's something different from other various position of involvement I have. So it's cool to just not always do the same thing. So that's why I was interested in like doing something different than just whatever I normally do. So.
Great, thank you very much. And Haley.
Yeah, so I really like sustainability. It's kind of something I've done a lot in my life. Like I grew up in a farm, I tree planted a little bit. I picked berries in BC and work on farms there. And I just like really like Concordia for that reason, because we're so invested in that. and it was just like a big motivator for me to join the CSU to do that. So that's a motivation.
Thank you very much. Mary?
If someone would like to motion that we appoint both these people, they could do so by notwithstanding standing regulation 17.
Great, we found that it was 17. Okay.
Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I appreciate that actually, thank you. Okay, well, that is the recommendation. If somebody wants to proceed with notwithstanding of the standing regulations, then we can vote. Alex?
I move to notwithstand standing regulation number 17.
Okay. In order to appoint both Antoine and Haley to the Sustainability Committee, great. So that is the motion. Is there a seconder to that? Rachel? Okay. This is a notwithstanding. It requires a 2/3 vote. So those in favor of the motion, please raise your placards. All right, those opposed? And abstentions? Okay. Lots going on at the Sustainability Committee.
Yay!
And the last point for appointments then will be Loyola.
We also have one seat available on the Loyola committee. We're working on the Loyola greenhouse, Concordia transitions. We'll probably have some events also at Loyola, working in collaboration with John next semester. We're thinking about potentially Winter Carnival, so it's a fun committee. Come join us. That was your time to elect yourselves, nominate yourselves.
All right. Lizzie.
I just want to say that if anyone is doubting how much fun Loyola Committee can be, Loyola Committee is so much fun. This is my second year on Loyola Committee, and I love it. I love Loyola, and this is a great way to give back to that campus.
Great. An impassioned endorsement.
Yeah.
How many openings do you have for this? Just the one.
One.
All right. Charles.
Yeah, I'll nominate myself for that committee.
Okay, Charles nominates himself. Is there a second? Second by Lucy. Would you like to elaborate a bit on why you'd like to join Loyola?
Well, I study there right now already, and also think it's a beautiful campus. Yeah, and I would not mind spending more time there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Those in favor of appointing Charles? Those opposed? And any abstentions? Great, that carries. All right, so thank you for the initiative and excitement from the new counselors. That does it for appointments, and we can now proceed to new business. The first of which is a pulled report, so the student life coordinator report. Lucy, you had pulled this. Would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, I just was wondering, since the report ends mid-sentence, if there's anything after the sentence that ends it. The information there was great. I was wondering if anything was missing from the conclusion.
The last sentence is, lastly, I will be closing the orientation account before the mid-mandate report. This means that COI reimbursements will be finalized and the account will have no further action.
Okay.
Yeah, I sent you the draft, so that's real good.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Gabe, did you want to speak to this?
No, not for now, that's fine.
Okay. Okay, well, if that clarification is done, again, for the new counselors, since this has been pulled from the consent agenda, it needs to be approved individually, so we'll proceed to a motion to approve the student life coordinator's report. So those in favor, or rather, it has to come from a motion. Yeah, could somebody motion before we vote? Motioned by Marcus?
Yeah.
Okay, seconded by, okay, Sunny. Those in favor of approving the student life coordinator report?
The final version, not the draft?
Yes, the final version.
All right.
Will appear in the minutes.
Did you hear my motion?
Those opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, Gabe.
I was just going to mention that the pizza did arrive recently, so it's just in the other room. If people wanted to motion to take a break.
Is that a motion to break? Yeah, Marcus.
Motion to take a 15-minute recess.
Okay, seconded by Terry. Is anyone opposed to a 15-minute recess? Great, unanimous. So we will reconvene in 15 minutes.
Remain
remains existing financial obligations that are still to being settled. Whereas currently, under the CSU's internal accounts, there remains a total sum of $164,502.97, which has been collected by the CSU for the FERC and is purposed for provincial student representation of our membership. Whereas following the results of the fall 2015 by-election, Concordia undergraduate students voted with a near 60% majority to affiliate with the Association for the Voice of Education in Quebec, AVEQ. Whereas AVEQ is a provincial-wide representative body with a mission to bring together the university student populations of Quebec with the goal of defending their pedagogical, political, social, and economic interests, primarily by means of research, representation, and mobilization. Be it resolved that Council approve the release of $60,000 from our internal account, which currently holds earmarked FERC fees to AVEQ for provincial student representation. Be it further resolved that a report be prepared by the External and Mobilization Coordinator to Council following the formal dissolution of the FERC, which outlines all the remaining FERC fees held under the CSU.
Great, thank you very much. That is a motion. Is there a seconder? Okay. Elaborate.
Yeah, so the whereas clauses, I think like neatly encompass a bit of the situation of where we're at. But as many of you already know, the FERC is in that process of legally dissolving and winding down. Right before coming, I don't know if Terry is here now, others in the back, they came from the Board of Governors meeting of the university where they just officially canceled the fee of the FERC, so that students in the upcoming winter semester wouldn't be paying that $2.50. So that has been officially canceled, which is great. And we already got a mandate from the CSU to go through this process at our last regular council meeting. That being said, there's still a couple of financial obligations that we have to the FERC. It's still like not finally legally dissolved, and in order to like remain, I would say like fiscally responsible, I think it's important that not all of the fees that are right now collected for the FERC be transferred, just in case there's still back fees that we still need to pay. That's why we set out just a chunk. And for those who were wondering, Terry has already spoken with the lawyer, the CSU lawyer, who agrees that this course of action, agrees with this course of action, and especially considering this is something that happens like only once every 25 years that this process happens of like new student federations and associations being created for the same purpose, for the purpose of provincial representation of Concordia student members. And lastly, for those who are wondering, the $60,000 amount is based on like analysis that we made as to what the short-term and medium-term needs of AVEQ would be, and those include like hiring intern coordinators, ensuring like translations, ensuring legal fees are paid, and ensuring that there be like a strong communication with all students across Quebec, so that the communication at AVEQ, we're able to increase that, as well as develop like stronger media relations at AVEQ. So that was like an analysis that was made, and for the short to medium term, we thought $60,000 would be appropriate. So yeah, I encourage if anyone has any questions about the motion and the amount or anything, please let me know.
All right, thank you very much. So Alois, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was wondering, like the 60,000 is that, so I gather that like CSU will be paying fees to AVEQ for the winter semester. Is the 60,000 gonna be deducted from that? Or like is it just like something else? And also I was wondering about like the fees that didn't get paid to FERC in the fall. Where is this money going? Because like it cannot be spent otherwise than in a provincial association, but it's, I don't know, like we're not yet affiliated. Well, we're not yet affiliated to AVEQ, so.
Yeah, so the fee, well, yeah. So the fees of the FERC of the fall semester are included into the 168 that you see over there. So the 168, it's hard to precisely when it ended, because the way the internal accounts work with the CSU, but essentially it's a small portion of the spring fees, the entire summer fees, and the entire fall fees. That's where that part of it is coming from. And what was the first question?
All the 60,000 like.
So the winter fees of AVEQ will start being collected as of winter. So after the drop deadline, that process will start just like in the past, and the $60,000 will be between now and that point as those fees start getting collected. So yeah. So the fees will be collected.
So it's an additional.
Yeah, it's an additional.
Alright,
Derek? Yeah, sorry for being in this awkward space. But I just wanted to add on to that one point that I think a really important way to evaluate like the unique situation we're in is that although the CSU is the arbiter of the fee today and has been since the FOOC no longer decided to collect fees from students, that money is not in the possession of the CSU because students paid that money to have provincial student representation. So we're in this nebulous circumstance where we need to adjudicate on the allocation of those funds, but ultimately those funds are not the CSU's in terms of the purpose for them, for their collection in the first place.
Thanks, Terry. If you'd like, there's a seat down here.
Oh, there is? Okay, sure.
Yeah. If in the eventuality of, well, if there's an excess of fund left after, so those 60,000 are taken out from the 160, and like, let's just say like some money has to be spent on FOOC to like settle the accounts, etc. What happens to the money that is left over?
Like to respond?
Yeah, so that's the second be it resolved outlines that. So as soon as we know exactly what's left, once the FOOC accounts, I'll create a report with the exact amount, and at that point, it'll be another decision of council as to like what to do with the funds.
Rachel.
I have a question. Is the CSU the only entity, I guess, or like of the different schools giving such a big amount? How is it like divided? Like, are smaller universities giving less amounts?
I see two desires to respond. Yeah.
Okay, so up until now, 3 other associations have given funds to AVEC in an interim sense, like up until the election. However, a lot of those organizations are not still members of the FOOC right now. So they're not in a situation where they have these funds that are in purgatory, right? So there are other associations, for instance, that are part of the Student Union of Quebec, and they have been utilizing those funds in a similar manner that the CSU has been. So it's just different on various campuses, like who they were affiliated to and when was that kill date and things like that. But I guess that answers your question. Yeah. Okay, great.
Gabe, do you want to add to that? Yeah. All right. All right, if there's nothing further, then we can proceed. Does somebody want the motion reread, or is it fairly clear in everyone's mind? All right then. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your placards. Those opposed? And any abstentions? All right, that carries. Thanks, Gabe. This takes us to the third point on policy changes. So, Marion, this is you.
Yes. So if you remember, before the by-election, when we were putting to ballot the bylaw changes, we basically approved all of the changes pending the confirmation from the membership during the by-election. And so since those bylaw changes passed in the November by-election, I've just updated the standing regs with the help of the policy committee. Thank you, Eloise, for the track changes, so that they reflect the changes to the bylaws. So that's mainly the names of the executive positions and the minute keeper have just been updated in the standing regulations. So I don't think it's worth going through them all and reading them out. We've just changed all the titles so that they are coherent between the standing regs and the bylaws. And we submitted those in the documents with track changes in red.
Yeah, and thanks, as always, for the red clarifications. It's very straightforward.
So I guess the motion is just to approve the new standing regs.
Great. Okay. Is there a seconder then? Yeah, okay. I mean, you've essentially motivated. Does anyone have any questions regarding the modifications? Okay, so we can proceed to a vote then. Those in favor of the motion, please raise your placards. opposed? And any abstentions? Great, that's carried as well. Point D on new business is one which is suggested to be in closed session. Marcus?
Move to enter closed session.
Okay, is there a second for that? Seconded Ben. Those in favor of moving into closed session for the duration of this agenda item? All right, those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so we'll just take a moment as you set up to, okay, I think we're ready to pick up again. So I saw Marcus and then Jason.
Move to ratify the motions taken in closed session.
Great, thank you. Seconded Jason. Is anyone opposed to the ratification of the motion made in closed session? Otherwise it can be adopted unanimously. Great, thank you very much. Jason, I imagine that was your point as well? Yeah. Okay, great. Which concludes new business and takes us to the question period and business arising. So a chance to ask any kind of general questions that anyone may have, or to mention something that may be arising as business for a meeting in the future. Eloise and then Lucy.
Oh, sorry, I was.
Okay.
I was wondering if there's any update about the asbestos report.
That addressed to Terry? Okay.
Do you have a
Yeah, sure. So there's been more coverage of John Aylin's misrepresentation of facts in the Gazette. I can circulate that on Facebook if people are interested. And I've been, or people have made inquiries with myself about the topic, because the communication internally within the university community has been relatively opaque. So we may try and use, adequate opportunities that are at our disposal to try and have a broader conversation about this topic, given the severity of what took place. And I think that since the university has removed the document, they recognize that there was certain problematics, but maybe not interpreting it into the same scale and scope that students and other members of the community have. But I have reached out, I think it was on yesterday, to the Luc Beauregard Center for Communications Luc Beauregard Center of Excellence in Communications Research to have a conversation about our issues with them. Yeah.
So there hasn't been the paper, it hasn't been disavowed by Concordia. It had just been taken down still, right?
Yeah, the university is taking the position that they don't want to act as a filter from academic freedom. So I think that it's more effective for efforts to have the document fully disassociated from the university to be targeted at the Luc Beauregard Center as opposed to the university. And I think there are others who agree with that. So, it'll be interesting to see how things develop. Yeah.
Marcus, I saw your placard go up. I may have seen others as well. Is that possible? Okay, none yet then. Marcus, go ahead.
Just hoping to point out for the future that perhaps we can limit the amount of council meetings that occur around this particular time of the year, as I'm sure we're all, pretty sunk down with exams and whatnot. I know we have a higher frequency this year than we did last year, and obviously there is a lot of material that's brought up and whatnot, but if there was some way to examine that to sort of redistribute when they come around, I think we'd all be in favor of that. I'd be interested to hear what other people have to think about it.
Thanks.
I'll say something.
Sure.
October, November, and January are the 3 months that we're required to hold 2 regular council meetings, one on the 2nd Wednesday and one on the 4th Wednesday. So December, February, March, April, May, we only have 1 meeting per month. And given that there's only a requirement to have 2 meetings once in the winter semester, but 2 meetings twice in the fall. Perhaps, if council is interested, there could be, so we could explore having a parallel where in the fall semester we have the same number of 2 meetings per month, which would be 1 instead of 2, and so that it matches what's happening in the winter semester.
Ben?
I was just going to say, if I remember correctly, and I might not, these extra, like additional meetings were added to our like meeting schedule. Back when meetings would last up until like 2 or 3 in the morning a lot of the time, and so there was a need for additional meetings. That hasn't happened for like 2 years, so it's possible that it could be revisited pretty substantially, because yeah, there's been like 3 meetings in the last like 4 weeks, but yeah, so it might not be necessary because it was kind of like policy during a time of like extreme tumultuousness. So.
Yeah, thanks. All right. If there's no further questions or business arising, then announcements. Okay, a couple placards starting with Ben and then John.
I just wanted to announce Burritoville is doing they're doing like a crowdfunder right now. So if people have, because they're dealing with some of their startup costs still. So if they've been working on this crowdfunder for like 5 months or so. They were going to launch it before, but it wasn't the right time, so they're launching it finally now. So I just wanted to let people know they're also having a party on Friday if people are looking for something to do as like a way to contribute to the crowdfunder. So just wanted to put it on people's radar. I'm going to be sharing it on Facebook. I could also add it to the CSU Facebook group, and anybody that could either give money or send it out on their Facebook, I'm sure would be appreciated by the Burritoville folks. And it's a project that students have invested money into, so there's that as well, which is another reason to share it. So.
Okay. John?
I have two.
Sure.
So tomorrow, there's a show at Reggie's, and it's the first show at Reggie's, and I just posted it on the council group. CGLO is going to be there. They're going to live broadcast the whole night on air. CUTV is coming, and they want to make like a short something of the night with video work. No Aloha's playing. They're everyone's favorite rock and roll band. Nanimal's playing. Commander Clark's in that band, and he's crazy. And then EMAC's involved, and they booked 2 DJs to go and close the night. And they're also going to be doing projections outside on the wall through the window while their DJs are playing. So it's free, and you should come and tell your friends to come. And it's also definitely going to fill up. It's going to like reach max capacity by like 10. So if you want to come for like 9.
All right, thanks.
And then second one, we're all going to go to Reggie's after this. If you want, you don't have to, but
yeah,
it's social.
Thanks. Great.
I also have 2 announcements.
Go ahead.
The first one is for the new counselors. I don't know if everybody was able to be asked of any dietary restrictions, but if you do have, please let us know, or any special needs or something in regards to that, you can approach any of the execs, and we're here for that. And my second announcement is to all the new committee members of sustainability. If you could just maybe wait after this is a done meeting, and we can just have maybe like a 5-minute meeting. It's a fun meeting for 5 minutes. And yeah, that's it.
Very much. Any further announcements? Seems to be concluded. Marcus?
Move to adjourn.
Is there a seconder for adjournment? Seconded Terry. Is anyone opposed to adjournment? Unanimous? Meeting adjourned. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, everybody.